Namaste, my friends. It's David Ault, and welcome to the gathering. It's story time. Are you ready? Number 4 of 5 stories that I am curating and telling to you about all things Kaleidoscope Child Foundation. That is truly my heart and soul, what has evolved into my most significant life's contribution. And these stories I'm telling because they're leading up to something that's pretty significant for us, a once in a lifetime opportunity, it feels like, and that is to make a documentary. We leave at the end of this year, and we are gone all of January into February in order to capture the origin story on film. We go to Cambodia and India, and there we will go into the villages and revisit the lives of the children who've been in our educational programs and look at our schools and do all of the things to capture the power of education and the power of community and the power of kindness and mutual offerings that different cultures give to one another. And that's just a fraction of the things that hopefully we will be able to bring to you via film. And as we were leading up to that, and as I was thinking about just there's so much, there's so many stories, I thought, what would it be like for me to share those with you? And these are the ones that don't often get told. There's usually not time, or we're just so focused in the doing of the nonprofit work that it's opportunities like this that warm my heart, bring a smile to my face, and help me realize just how much time has lapsed and how much ground has been covered in these 20 years. And so this story is from 2013, and I'm fascinated by because the people who are in my life now, the most significant players in the support team for Kaleidoscope Child Foundation, had not even gone yet. They didn't come until 2014. So this is even before those who are actively serving on my board knew about us. And we're there, and I had always been doing something that I called a volunteer. It was my way of bringing people to help me in the schools, to help me in the villages, to help me solidify the systems that needed to be in place, to get them to see the beauty of the culture and the people and the hearts um, and to trust and know that everybody who had gone with me up until that time and since have come back changed at depth. It's been some of the most impactful experiences of people's lives. And so 2013 looked as though it would be the same. And it was a fairly large group. I think we were almost 18 people. And what that meant was that sometimes on some of the days we would be in service, we would split up opportunities. And also, a regular part of those volunteers was providing water wells for families. It was it was a basic process that had to do with augers and PVC piping and generators. And it was a way to get deeper down into the ground, at least 200 feet or below, in order to strike water that wasn't 100% pure, but it was much, much better than the mud holes that so many of them had become accustomed to using. Think about it. If there's just a natural crevice in the ground surface and rainwater collected, that was what they used. And when that dried up, they had to keep searching for other means because they were in villages without equipment or sophistications or any other kind of tools to be able to do anything other than that. Sometimes, if there was a well somewhere, maybe it was a mile away, and they would have to make that trip multiple times a day just to have the water that they needed for drinking and cooking and bathing. So these wells made the access of water so much more convenient. I mean, it's like you and I having a sink. Imagine if you didn't have a sink or a bathroom. And many, many, many of these villagers did not have that. So these wells were designed to bring a bit of ease And you could still boil the water if it was necessary, but you could also use these water wells to help with irrigation to start a garden, to run that water line to other places though that you could they would plant things like mung bean and lemongrass and vegetables and some fruits. And it was a real game changer for hundreds of families that we gave these wells to. So it's 2013, and we're still maybe only 4 or 5 years into that program. Big group, we're split up. And the group that I was with, we went out to a village area that seemed to be designated by, I'm going to call them government workers or military workers. There wasn't much of a military in Cambodia. There wasn't much of a stabilization in government, but these were men, predominantly men, who had been hired that were making practically nothing. And this was like a village that had been cordoned off for them. And there were all the respective house huts and things of that nature. And so my administrator, Tiene, had said that they too were in need of water wells. And she had vetted several families, and one was a man, just a man living by himself who lived amongst these government workers, for he too had been one. And this man was shunned by his community because he had been diagnosed with HIV, AIDS. And he had had a wife and a children, and the wife and children had left him. The term that they often use is they go away to their homeland, meaning that wherever their origin of their birth, whatever province they came from or village they came from, oftentimes in hardships or in other circumstances, they would go back to what was called their homeland. So she had gone back to her homeland with the children and left him by himself. His house was a shack, just a couple of corrugated tin pieces, and very primitive and dirty. And we showed up. We were a group of 8, and we were there to begin the process of working with the locals to build a well. And what was interesting about this was for the first time, we were seeing prejudice among the people in the villages against another. I think because of the stigma of HIV, the lack of education, the fear that perhaps something might happen to them, they had pretty much ostracized him. He was drinking out of a mud hole. There was very little food. And when we arrived, there was a lot of conversation about his care, about medication. There were medication bottles somehow that had come from somewhere that were unopened and just lying on the ground. There wasn't supervision for him. He was just getting by. He was very weak and very thin. And we came to put a well into his property. It was obvious from looking at these conditions that just putting a well in there was not going to do much. This human being needed help. He needed his little thatched hut cleaned. He needed his bedding rearranged in a way that was more hygienic. There was trash everywhere. There were remnants of children's toys and old shoes and things from when his family had lived with him that were just kind of buried half in the mud and dirt. And so we said, we have to stay. We have to come back. And this was towards the end of that trip, and we carved out an entire day, and the same 8 people came back, and we loaded bags of trash. We began to do whatever it was to bring some semblance of order to his property. And through an interpreter, I would communicate with him, and I would tell him who we were and why we were here. And we were excited because the go ahead the day before to do the well meant that probably by the time the second day we were there, the well would be finished, and he could be shown how to do the pump and how to access that. And something happened on that second day, that visit where we were doing all the cleaning. I guess our presence to the rest of the community might have eased the fear within their minds. Like we weren't afraid to be around him. We had our gloves on as we were moving all of the trash, but we weren't ostracizing him. We were treating him well, and they became a little curious as to why we were there. And when they walked over the hills and the down the roads from their respective huts, and they saw us doing all of this, they started to ask questions, and TNA and the other people that were driving us started to tell them why we were there. And then all of a sudden, as the well was coming to life and the water was spurting, Tiene had had the presence of mind to go and buy a bunch of seed for vegetables and other things to grow because she thought maybe what we could do is also plant him a little garden. Well, her forethought to do that, combined with the curiosity of the villagers, erupted into this activity where the Westerners, all of us, and the villagers together began to create a beautiful little atmosphere for this man who was dying. We were all on our hands and knees in the dirt. We were putting around this sort of green mesh thing to keep animals out from to protect the seeds that we were doing. Well, the villagers helped make sure that the lines from the newly installed water well would drain in a sufficient way in order to fertilize that. And all of the sudden, there was an opportunity for me through the interpreters to let everybody know that this was the beauty of life coming together to support our own. And it was a moment in time. In fact, I was looking through social media to go, when exactly was this? Because I knew it was in 2013. But I came across this post, and this is what I wrote on February the 1st of 2013. It said, there are days when you feel nothing could top the joy that you are feeling. And then another day comes and your breath is taken away in even greater ways than before. This official last day was unplanned and unheralded as we returned to this man's house hut to simply clean it up for him. Cleanup led to talk of putting in a garden, led to seed buying, which led to a whole community of villagers pitching in to help him feel dignity after long challenges with HIV. It was a few hours of what is so beautifully right with the world. That man passed away before the next year when I went back. But as I was on my knees planting seeds in his little postage stamp sized plot of land with all of these other Cambodian workers and government officials, or not officials, but just people who had these jobs. As we were all down on our knees together doing this, he was next to me, this very thin man, and as I smiled at him and I said a few words, he said to one of the Cambodian speaking people who interpreted, he said, "Is this heaven? Have I died? Is this heaven?" Again, unplanned, a spontaneous thing that just organically blossomed into a series of beautiful kindnesses and connections. And I would like to think that when you and I are available to kindness and the not strategic things, but just being aware and addressing a need when you see the need, that something inside the person receiving that says, have I died? Is this heaven? Is this heaven? Because it is heaven. I know that you have been on the receiving end of kindness. And I want you to pause, not just now, but in the days to come, and reflect upon those kindnesses, those blessings, those little tastes and glimpses of heaven. And find it within yourself to be the type of person that pays it forward, not for any other recognition or any other kind of ego satisfying event, but to just do that, to be in the circuitry of kindness, because I say that that's what the world needs, but I find that it's what you and I need to be reminded of the value of life, of what's important, and to know that there is no such thing as insignificance in terms of quantity, large or small. It's not based on that kind of merit. It's based upon the intention of offering the kindness. Let's do that. Let's be a part of the solution. Let's break down the stigma and the fear and begin to come together and know that by doing that, all of a sudden, all of these other people are attracted and wanting to participate. And we can give the gift of having others feel as though they have died and gone to heaven. Blessings.